In just the last few months, we have worked directly with over 100 different companies from around the world. Documentation, process improvement, those words traditionally were like a sub niche. It was like some certain kind of quality, total quality management consultant might worry about that, but no one else.
People embraced it a lot more than I thought, because I know for a lot of people it's a kind of a scary word, or represents something that something they should be doing but aren't. Then they do it, and the actual value returned is I suddenly understand my business so much more than I did before I did this, right? Because you now speak the language of business.
All right, so Hayden, we have just finished cohort 2 of Second Brain Enterprise, the program that we launched for AI business transformation. There was about 50-something companies in each of the cohorts, which means, and this is kind of mind-blowing as I say it, in just the last few months, we have worked directly with over 100 different companies from around the world. So why don't we actually start right there? We had an open question when we launched the first one and the second one. Who was going to join? We sort of put out this wide-ranging call. Was there anything that surprised you about who joined, either the companies that joined or the specific people that joined the program?
I mean, it was a very diverse group. I'd say it was probably maybe a quarter like solopreneurs, and then maybe another quarter of people with under 10 employees, and the other half had anywhere between 10 and 300. There were a couple of the businesses that joined when they first did their posts and their intros. I was like nervous because they had businesses larger than a business I'd ever grown, and I hope we can provide value to them. And both of them actually ended up being probably our greatest referral partners. They really enjoyed it. It was structured in such a way that we could try to provide value to business regardless of industry. But I was genuinely surprised that like all of the industries, it actually did work and give the right context for all those industries. And I didn't really see, any industries that didn't benefit from it, that was a nice, pleasant surprise.
Yeah, even that one word diversity, it strikes me that AI is this kind of great equalizing force. Like normally any sort of business education or consulting or anything, it would be in strict bands by size. Like, oh, if you're, 1 to 5 employees do this, oh, you're 5 to 25 this, 25 to 50. It's like so size specific. But AI sort of flattens that because it can sort of scale up solutions up and down. You can get a solution that was originally designed for a 100-person company and just say, well, what would that look like for a 5-person company? And it will tell you. And so it almost levels the playing field and creates a ton of opportunities, I would say in both directions, for opportunities for small businesses to act as large ones, or as large ones normally can, and also large businesses to act as small businesses in terms of their innovation and nimbleness.
So part of the course, I've designed assessments. So I have an operating system that I've used in my own sort of business buying activities. And I kind of repurposed a lot of those diligence assessments for these companies to try to determine where they were. And originally I was working with programmers to like create the assessments, and I was trying to come up with examples for all these different industries. And then right before the first cohort started, I thought, what if I put the assessment into Claude, and then Claude has the context already because we started building a master prompt together, and it works so much better. So that was actually a big surprise. The ability for Claude to like take those assessments and tailor them and even give examples directly for you is just, it's crazy.
Absolutely. So the customization, how things can be adapted, rescaled, rescoped, almost makes it hard in some ways. Part of me almost wishes, well, what if we had clear evidence that this doesn't work for this specific kind of company or this size of company, then we could ignore that. But what we're sort of left with is, oh no, AI can really touch almost every part of every business, which is a little bit daunting, to be honest. There were some areas of especially great promise, I think, that emerged. What were a couple of those that stand out to you in terms of like, this is the ideal scenario for AI implementation?
It wasn't a surprise, but understanding like how helpful it is for process development, documentation in general, that's really AI's strong suit. So when we were designing the curriculum, we're trying to do a bunch of things at once, such that by the time you finish this 5-week course, you had all your process outlined, you had a master prompt, you had all of these like fractional coaches, And so we're trying to do a lot at once, but those areas, which I think we'll talk about here, are probably the areas that I think it's strongest. So anything involving documentation and setup of fairly complex systems, anything involved with thought partnership, once you've given full context, and then anything that's involved with sort of research or personalization, I think people found a lot. Actually, I found people found more value than I expected from that.
In research.
Yeah, and like the prompts that we did around like researching a competition and like the UVP stuff. So how about you? What were some of the biggest surprises for you, at least in terms of who the cohort was?
So there was this interesting paradox where I think the main area of business that most of these companies were targeting was operations from the very beginning, from their initial applications. But it wasn't how I'd expect. It wasn't going in and saying, oh, let's just automate everything, because that's kind of like the big trend right now. Everyone's like, well, how many stages does your end-to-end workflow have? As if you're just trying to make everything automated. In fact, in reality, what we saw was more like operations transformation. It was like going in, seeing everything through an operations lens, everything in terms of process, but not being anchored to the status quo, using AI to ask, how could this be different? How could this be faster? How could it be radically more, efficient, effective, impactful? In some cases, how could it not have any humans in the loop if that's not necessary? And so it's almost like this, it's like two different sides of the brain, the operations side of the brain and the future-facing imaginative side, which aren't two parts that normally talk. But I think among entrepreneurs and business owners, maybe is one group of people where they do tend to talk. And so we would have these conversations that you couldn't, in the cohort, that you couldn't classify as left brain or right brain. They were like a fusion of left brain and right brain, analytical and creative.
It's also interesting that I remember looking at the applications, and you're right, the vast majority said operations. And then at the end of the sessions in both cohorts, we asked, what's the next step for you? Like as you start implementing. And in both cases, it was marketing and then sales.
Interesting.
Either what they learned throughout was that they had more leverage in market to sales, or maybe they actually accomplished what they wanted to accomplish with the operations. I'm not sure, but interesting sort of before and after snapshot.
Another big one too was I was really surprised how much of the program we spent really educating them on what I would call foundational business frameworks that are pre-AI, that are not recent, in some cases have been around for a long time, that are just like almost like business common sense, although it's not common, just like this is how business works, this is how businesses function. But we found that we needed that to have just a common language.
Yeah, it's the table stakes, right? It's the shared language, not only between instructors and students and students and students, but most importantly, it's between the students and the AI, right? And so we actually had to, part of it was building the master prompt with that shared language so the AI knew the exact same language. And then you could look at everything with a lot more precision. Yeah, I've been working with operating systems for over 10 years. And when we buy companies, often they don't have leadership teams, and we want to professionalize them by introducing operating systems. So this was kind of repeating a lot of that, though now it's more with AI and less about just leadership and I guess cadence of communication, which is what we focused on before.
There's no like universal business education. I mean, there's MBAs, but that's a minority of people. It's like a lot of people owning or running businesses, they either started the business on accident, or it just slowly grew over the years, or they sort of like happened into it. And so two business owners talking, say any two random business owners, they can't assume almost any shared knowledge. Like what is foundational and a crucial everyday framework for one person, the other person could have never heard of in their life. So the field of business is it is a not very highly structured, hierarchical knowledge domain. It is piecemeal and kind of tribal, and like there's different lineages and like cultures that are maybe even at odds with each other.
Yes, I hate that. And so, which is why I like to define things, and I like to create frameworks that are like MISI, right? Mutually exclusive, cumulatively exhaustive. Because when I want to be able to have a conversation, I want people to be able to have a conversation with each other with precision. for them to say, and they were having this conversation partially through the cohort, you know, they went through the marketing and they understand their unit economics well, and then they went through the financial side, and now they can say, oh, I actually have a working capital problem. I didn't know that. I thought I had a marketing problem, but I have a working capital problem. Okay, that's easier to fix. Otherwise, yeah, like you said, someone who's just started up a business, not gone through any formal training, it's just I have a problem and I don't really know exactly how to fix it.
It's like AI doesn't really help that problem, because AI knows, of course, like every framework that's ever existed, and it can use them equally. It can draw on them all equally, but that's too many. So like just take one domain of business. Let's just say like lead generation. There's probably like 30 or many more frameworks for that. And it's really interesting to think about how, like, you might think, oh, well, I want to use the best framework, but there's not one right, correct framework. It's more like they're different maps of the territory. They're different approaches to a problem. So part of, I think, what you were doing is introducing a point of view. You're not saying, oh, here's the 25 different frameworks for this topic. You're saying, I've tried a bunch of them. This is the one I like the best for these reasons. So you came in with a strong point of view, and they could disagree or agree. But what was powerful about that is, from that point forward, all the parties involved, which is you, me, our teams, the participants, their teams, our AI, their AI, there's like a crowd, involved in this. We can all at least look at the situation from that same point of view.
Well, I think, yes, there's a lot of ways to do things, but the fundamentals don't really change, right? And like the fundamental metrics that you track around customer acquisition costs and lifetime value, that doesn't change. But once you fully understand that, you can look at all of these different lead generation tactics and compare them well. One of the coaches that we share, it's like an AI coach, your fractional CMO. It kind of coaches you through an assessment across all of your current channels, your customer acquisition costs. Most people didn't actually know their full unit economics per channel. And it does that and knows it, saves it into your master prompt. But then it goes out and tells you what you could be doing, these other channels. And so I was going through it with one of my businesses as I was teaching it, and I came up with a huge amount of notes on stuff that could be done, right? Like it told me 100% should be doing YouTube and 100% should be doing LinkedIn. Like those would be the two channels I would focus on. I thought about it and looked at it and like, yeah, that makes total sense. So I passed it on to my customer acquisition guy.
This brings up another lesson, and we're sort of meandering all over the place here, but it's like, I noticed that we're almost just like, we're peers of these people. We're figuring out AI like in real time along with them. In other topics, you might think, oh, you are an expert and you have all the authoritative knowledge, and now you're standing back and you're imparting that knowledge. But AI is such an unknown entity. Like we're discovering day by day, week by week, what it's even capable of, what it's for, what it's not for. So I almost feel like we ended up the cohort having learned at least as much as the participants.
100%. Yeah. There is no real true like experts, and like hardly anyone has 10,000 hours in AI implementation. I think the real value add, really, if you break it down to it, it was we were able to take a bunch of business owners together and take these shared frameworks and language and put them together and then build these master prompts and process for these businesses. That doesn't mean that like we were even really teaching so much as like we're all following the same frameworks.
One thing I noticed is we were a lot of times helping them design experiments. So like they'd have a question, we could give an answer, but really we want them to not be dependent on us. We want them to, over time, be increasingly reliant on their own AIs. So often, what was our most common answer? Have you asked Claude this? And it's funny how often the answer was, it hadn't even occurred to them.
I honestly felt a little bit like a dick doing it. It's like the new, have you Googled it, right? But the reality was, whenever, because we did these alpha hours, and whenever these questions came up, I just didn't have the context. And so I would need to ask 3 or 4 clarifying questions just to get the context and then attempt to answer. But they already had Claude set up with the context. So if you just ask, it really just was fast to say, have you asked Claude? And then like, no. It's okay, well, we'll ask Claude because they already have the context.
Yeah, and over the course of the 5 or so weeks of the program, we ended up every class session and every week adding more context to their master prompt. So even just over the course of the program, the answers they were getting back were better and better and better until towards the end of the program, like nothing we could say could even compare in scope or specificity to what Claude could tell them.
That's an interesting observation. Our value as a coach diminished almost to zero by the end because of the value that was then transmitted to AI.
Let's talk a little bit about process. I feel like that was like the word of the program. Process, process, process. What did you see in people's reaction or relationship to process that surprised you?
People embraced it a lot more than I thought, because I know for a lot of people it's a kind of a scary word, or represents something that something they should be doing but aren't. The reason we started with process is anyone who's gone through any kind of like AI workflow implementation knows that you need to start with process. And if you actually talk to implementers, that's their biggest problem, especially with small business, is actually getting processes from them. And so the goal here was, can we create, again, a MECE framework of even describing what process is and how it applies to business. Like we call it like the invisible structure of business. And then even like giving it, this is what a process overview is, this is what a blueprint is, this is what a guide is. And again, we all share the same language. And so with specificity, I can talk about the YouTube video guide, and I can talk with AI about it, I can talk with people about it, and we can reference it, and we all know who's involved, what's involved, the steps is very useful. With the framework we taught, I ended up probably returning to almost something I'd forgotten, which was how to kind of think of processes in 3 different layers of like sort of business identity, strategic planning, which informs the customer life cycle, which we've talked about, which is enabled by all of these different enablement processes. And so each of our sessions went over one of these processes. We ended up going over pretty much like session 0 was a lot of strategic planning, because that informed the customer life cycle. And then went over all the customer life cycle, market to lead, lead to sale, sale to delivery, delivery to success, success back to market. And then the 2 biggest enabling processes that I've always found in small business that people need to work on is in financial performance management, and in sort of the hire to retire process. So everything involving workforce culture. And then the last one we did was the product and service design, which was pretty specific to AI.
So I think you even said this, that everything in business kind of boils down to a process. Everything at the end of the day is a process, which is so interesting because, yeah, process, documentation, process improvement, those words traditionally were like a sub niche. It was like some certain kind of quality, total quality management consultant might worry about that, but no one else. And so what has been this super duper niche thing has now become the gateway that you have to pass through to effectively utilize AI in your business.
And what's interesting is like the perceived value of getting to know that for a customer getting into this is, oh, I want to use AI and I want to create workflows in AI. Then they do it, and the actual value returned is I suddenly understand my business so much more than I did before I did this, right? Because you now speak the language of business.
It's kind of like how you when the housekeeper is coming over, you clean your house first. It's like the preparation for the thing actually is half of the battle and halfway to doing the thing.
I liken process in business to music. If you have no musical training, right, your brain naturally kind of understands melody and rhythm a little bit, right, and you can reproduce notes. And then you start learning and you understand there are these things called chords, and then you understand that there's chord progressions. As you get better at music, you just realize there's just easy patterns, right? And then everything becomes a lot easier. It's the exact same in business. If you don't have any formal training, all you see is the notes. You're not seeing the chords, you're not seeing the progressions, you're not seeing like the language properly. That was something a lot of people, I think, got value from.
And if you're serious about AI business transformation, first of all, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We're sharing everything we learn here on YouTube. But also, if you'd like to join us and be part of the experience that we talked about in this video, learn with us, from us, alongside us, and many other business owners and leaders, I encourage you to join the waitlist for the next cohort of the Second Brain Enterprise program, which you can find out as well in the description below. So basically what this looked like concretely is we spent much of the program having people document their existing processes with the help of AI, right? That was almost like, in terms of just hours spent, that's probably what they spent the most time doing, working with AI on documenting their processes.
I would say probably equal between that and working with AI to assess their current abilities across each of those processes, and then feeding the export of that into their master prompt. That was maybe like 2/3, and 1/3 was maybe process. I guess it depends on how fast you were.
Yeah, there was almost like this loop, which you're kind of describing, that emerged that we didn't intentionally design, which was like assess the current state of a given function of your business, put that context that you discovered into your master prompt, document the existing process, and then redesign what the process should look like with the help of AI. Is that the basic loop that we ran through?
Yep.
Which is itself a process.
It was designed.
By the way, if you want to know more about this topic, check out this video, which is called "Is Your Business AI Ready?", which goes much deeper into that exact question. Another great takeaway was seeing how people responded to the sort of AI C-suite of advisors. So say a little bit about how that turned out.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, the approach was, first of all, we're separating business into its component pieces, and then we're creating assessments for each of those pieces, and then we're turning those assessments into like scoring, right? And turning those assessments into areas of improvement. And then a coach basically designing a prompt, or pretty sophisticated prompts, that creates sort of that fractional coach around that piece that then understands everything about that piece in your business. So you see like these long prompts on like Reddit and everything. They're only really useful if you've already built the context. But once you've built the context, so there were 3 main coaches that we introduced, which was like a fractional CMO, a fractional CRO, so Chief Revenue Officer, and a fractional CFO. Those 3 pieces with the context, by the time you get to them, you have full context, are so incredibly useful. Like, so I kind of designed it around, and they're basically designed around the assessments, and I've been designing the assessments around sort of the top people in my companies that do these things. And honestly, I prefer to interact with those prompts now in my businesses than with those people. Well, just because it's so much faster, right? And it's no longer asking them for something and then sending an email and waiting for a response and sending something back. So from that perspective, you save a ton of meetings. And in some cases where you don't have that person, you maybe don't need them. Right? Like I don't think a CFO is necessary for a non-public company or a company, of below a certain size or below certain sort of fintech requirements or something.
So basically what this looks like concretely is they have, by the end of the program, a project in Claude. A project is a self-contained workspace that has its own context, with a persistent set of conversations. So you can go in and have multiple ongoing conversations that happen whenever you need them to happen, right? And what's so interesting is how helpful it was to personify those projects, right? Like you can say, oh, this is your integrated financial system. It's like, okay, that's cool, but your CFO somehow is more attractive, just that little reframe in language, because and I think it's helpful for the AI too, because now the AI knows from what, again, point of view it should have. It knows, oh, a CFO is conservative and responsible and risk averse and is always pointing out these kinds of things and has this almost like a personality. And it would kind of take on that personality since you had assigned it that role. And then on your side too, almost function as a trigger. Anytime you would have a question in your mind, at least this is how I'm using my fractional CFO. Every time I have a question in my mind, instead of, oh, let me write that down to ask our CFO, because we do have a human one in our next meeting. And by the time that rolls around, I probably forgot about it or forgot that note. Instead, I just turn right then in that moment to our fractional CFO, pick up a conversation that maybe is already existing from who knows when, and I have my answer right then with full context.
I think now that you say this, in the next cohort, I'm going to personify it further and just go with actual names. Like this is Romina, the fractional CFO, right? Because if you're able to do that, and again, you can put it all into your master prompt, you could technically have like leadership team conversations about topics where, Mark, Romina, and Jeff all weigh in from their perspectives. So
I think that's an awesome idea. You almost start to productize it. And then you can do things like, like you guys talk, you guys confer, and then come to me with the answer. And so maybe they come to you with an answer that the CFO, the CMO, and the CRO have already reached consensus on that. And then you can, evaluate it and ask follow-up questions. That would be a fascinating path to walk down.
And you can now do that without any kind of agentic workflow, right? Just within Claude or ChatGPT by just having a sophisticated prompt, like step-by-step prompt, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which we're doing in the course. So step 1, Romina, to go over this. Step 2, Mark, review it. Step 3.
I even wonder, this is really going far afield now, but if in the long term you want different LLMs, maybe different LLMs have different biases and different strengths and weaknesses. So you want ChatGPT to be the CFO because it's sort of like straight and narrow. You want Claude to be the CMO because it's a little more creative and right-brained. Like you start to really be able to build your leadership team using the best AI technology that is available.
Another thing I learned, and actually I learned this, so we did this alpha cohort with one of my companies, as we probably did 4 or 5 sessions, just to see what, as a test before we put the beta cohort through. And people use AI in very different ways, right? You have obviously different personality types. There are people who are certainly more detail-oriented, more perfectionist than others. And what I found is like the natural ADHD visionary entrepreneur is really, really well suited to AI. To be able to have like multiple conversations open with things going at a time. AI is just working. Like to me, this is addictive. This is why I spend so much time in AI, is like, I like to have many things open at once and work on a few things at once. And AI is working in the background. Every 2 minutes, I get an update and I go back to this. I'm like, okay, iterate. Next, okay, iterate. It's like, it's perfect for me. Yeah. But there are some people who, are much more linear, sequential. And for those people, it was really funny. At the end of it, you ask, how long is your master prompt? It was kind of like an ongoing joke. And those people were like 95 pages long. It's like, it was just insane. And so those people could spend as much time as they wanted, really. I think we designed it so that it would ideally be 2 to 3 hours a day. I think those people probably spent, their full day.
We've talked a lot about AI and what it's surprisingly capable of. Let's talk a bit about what the role of humans is now. So what do humans do now in this AI transformed business landscape?
That's a great question. And what are the valuable roles that will exist going forward? HubSpot CEO, I can't remember his name right now, but he coined the term "U to the power of AI," and I really like that. One of the issues with AI is I'd say it's like maybe top 20% or top 30% in everything. But if you really want to be a thought leader, you probably need to be top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. When you are a thought leader and you can work with AI and actually correct it, then you can start creating things at 10, 20x speed. If you're not a thought leader and you just go off what AI does for you, you can create average things at 10 to 20x speed, right? So I really do think that domain expertise is now more important than ever. And I find it really interesting that, the actual LLM companies themselves have noticed this and are giving these ridiculous $100+ million signing bonuses to top 0.1% people, because they know that person is now AI enabled. That's the difference, right? Maybe they would have given a $5 million signing bonus 2 years ago, but actually 100 million probably makes sense.
It's like, don't listen to what people say, look at what they do. Yeah. And those companies are the most AI leveraged and will be ongoingly. And if even they are going in that direction, it's really a sign of things to come.
Yeah, so I think domain expertise is really important. Obviously, there's still going to be roles in things that AI is not great at, that requires sort of human connection. There's an interesting apprenticeship challenge now, in the sense that someone very junior probably doesn't need to be hired and can be trained up from nothing. When AI first came, I was really, because we used a lot of outsourced workers, like offshore workers, and I was really concerned for the Philippine economy, right? And then when we started doing the AI training, a lot of those people really picked up that skill set, and I realized actually I'm now actually more concerned about the junior level employees in the US and in North America, because now those people are top 30% or 20% and they're domain experts in whatever they work in, right? It's automatic. So it's almost like you're either a domain expert or you're entry level in a low cost of living place, and those two people will have very strong returns for a company. What do you think? What did you learn about what AI can do for people and humans' roles?
One thing that I noticed was it just became more and more clear as the program has progressed how important that AI operator role is going to be. Even in the case, many of the participants in our course are business owners. And you see that even with AI as this incredible overriding priority, these are busy people. They have so much on their plate, so many responsibilities. And AI, I think, even with all its potential today, still does require time as its main input. You have to spend time. And so it kind of implies that there's a role one level or even two or more levels below the business owner. I mean, they need the permission. They need the permissioning of the owner, right? But maybe that might even be a role for junior or mid-career people, is to be the person that really experiments with AI, voraciously consumes content about AI, maybe even goes in like a SWAT team to different teams to set up a camp, run an assessment, add context to the master prompt, go through that loop we described. So I think I can see the AI operator role being this really promising career path that is especially suited. This is another thing I noticed is a lot of the openness toward AI right now comes down to personalities. There's certain personalities that are more open to change, more open to uncertainty, that are abundance oriented, not fear driven. There's a series of personality traits, and maybe this will change as it matures, but AI is still high uncertainty, I would say. And so if you have a personality like that is open to change, I would really especially look at one of these emerging career paths.
The AI part is that's a really good one. And I think that's going to become a very large emerging role. Also, just thinking about the role of roles in general, I think that's all going to shift massively. So my companies that I've started up, so even including Second Brain, we have a very different approach to roles, and it looks a lot more like a startup with well-defined process. But you have multi-talented people kind of filling their day with a bunch more than what they used to, because they're all AI enabled. So the idea, one guy in our team does Meta, market to lead, does sort of the facilitation role, and does some of the sales management, right? That would normally be 3 people in the past, but the expectation and the standard that we're setting as a company is that we're going to be 4 or 5 people. We're going to build, a 10 million EBITDA company with 5 people, and that's all you actually need. Now, there may be, like, it's probably useful also to have a few VAs for those reasons, but again, it's more like a leadership team of, like, the T band doers who are outcome oriented, who accept, like you said, accept the new standards of AI, which is we're going to get more done. And because of that, we're also going to get compensated like owners. And that's the piece that I'm really interested in exploring going forward, because I think there's two potential worlds here, and it comes down to ownership and who owns the benefits from AI. Is it the LLMs? Is it NVIDIA? Is it the business owner? Is it the employees? Like, you could look at this all the way down the chain and say, if NVIDIA has no competition, they can have crazy profit margins, and the LLMs won't make any money, and no one else will make money. Okay, and if the LLMs have no competition and just ChatGPT wins and everyone else gets left behind, same issue. They can take all the profit. If the owner takes it, well, then we're going to see even more inequality, right, in the world. And quite frankly, like, how are you going to motivate your employees to now take on, 3 or 4x what they used to and do the work it takes to, like, automate everything else? And then if the employee takes it all, then what benefit does the owner have? So I'm really interested in that philosophical solution. My solution personally is that I just give ownership of the company to the employees and only work with people who accept that new standard. But I think there's other ways to go about it.
Yeah, gosh, so many interesting things there. Like, even just going back to the thing about, I've noticed this too, is jobs or roles are now becoming these incredibly diverse grab bags of different things. Like, I noticed on my team, in the past, the only person, I was sort of the only person that had extremely diverse, like, I'm writing a blog post or a book on one hand, and then I'm doing a YouTube video, and then I'm, like, diving into operations. But then all my support people were highly specialized. But now everyone on the team looks like what my role did a few years ago. What I think is so interesting about that trend is I feel like it's a reversal of how the economy has been evolving for many decades.
No, yeah, for sure.
Like, go back to since the 50s or whenever, the whole arc has been more and more and more specialization, just ever greater specialization. And now we're turning that tide to go back this way.
Well, it's because AI does the specialization, right? So what do you now need? You need domain expertise to basically drive the specialization in new ways and still innovate, because AI is not good at innovating. And then you need a human in the loop. Now, a human in the loop here needs to probably be in, like, 15 loops at once. And you need to have that. So again, that ADHD mentality, like someone who absolutely thrives on being able to work on 5 different things with 5 different agents at once and make decisions and be that human in the loop, is really going to succeed in this world. And which I feel great for, because they really did not succeed in the specialized structure of the education system kind of represented the last 100 years.
I mean, I think we're going to see a rise in entrepreneurship. So my wife, Lauren, just came out with her book. It's called Beyond Acceptance. She has a business coaching people to get into, like, elite grad schools. And this book is the knowledge of having worked with, I think she's worked with over 500 students from all around the world. And I'm reading it now, and it's interesting because she's basically saying resumes don't matter anymore. That's all AI generated. Like, essays, there's all these different pieces, but the central, most important thing from her point of view is projects. You don't just write on a piece of paper, I know this, I can do this, etc. You demonstrate, you say, this is something I built, whether it's a business, whether it makes money or not, some sort of initiative or event or result that you created, and then you present that as evidence that you are someone worth betting on. And as I'm reading, I'm like, this feels very familiar. Wait a minute. She's describing entrepreneurship, the ability to go out, make something from nothing on your own initiative. So maybe it's like all the entry, and I feel like this would be a positive direction for society. Instead of all the entry level pathways being like junior, analyst at so-and-so mega corporation, it was all these, like, whether you call them apprenticeships or like short-term projects or whatever, Maybe that will be the entry level. And they would have even more initiative, because sometimes it's hard for young people to have initiative, but AI would enable many of those projects.
Well, and the cost of startup is negligible now, right? So like I built a software product in the last 4 months with one developer and myself as a product manager spending a few hours a week. It's funny, that developer used to be the COO of a company I had in Mexico City that had 20 developers beneath them. And we did more in 4 months with that one developer than we did in probably a year with 20 people because of the feedback loop, because AI does all the heavy lifting. And the reality is like you can now recreate what would probably be, $20 million of IP, right, in software development for 20 grand. And so, of course, that enables an entrepreneurship. I think the real battle people will have, or companies and business owners will have going forward, will be how can I properly allow people to be entrepreneurs using AI?
Yeah.
I think that's a super interesting topic.
Yeah.
We'll be getting there, I think, in the next several months.
I think so. Was there anything surprising, or what did we see in terms of the biggest problems or obstacles that people face? Was there anything that we saw that we didn't expect would be an obstacle?
I anticipated most of the obstacles. I mean, it's a lot. That was the number one obstacle. It's a fire hose. I was pleasantly surprised at how well people dealt with that. And we got better at it in the second cohort than in the first. The natural progression of sort of the problem solution cycle. I think people entered in with this problem of not having having AI with full context in their business, not being fully AI enabled themselves, and maybe not seeing business as it truly is. And I think that problem is solved, and it creates a new problem, which is, okay, great, now I'm to the power of AI and I get it. How do I make my team to the power of AI? How do I identify, the right person? How do I share the master prompts with them? Not in a way that here's the master prompt, to go for it, but they actually need to go through the same sort of experience. Yes. To some degree. They need to hit the challenges. Yes. And feel ownership of it. So I think that's the next obstacle that a lot of people are dealing with now. Were there obstacles that you didn't anticipate?
I think I was a bit surprised the extent to which, and maybe this is because you and I have now spent a lot of concentrated time over a long span of time with AI, is the experience that people go through as participants is a little bit like a religious conversion. It's not just like, oh, I'm sitting here and you're presenting me information. Okay, now I have the information. It's like, it's a personal growth. It's a personal transformation process. They are changing the way they think, of course, the way they see, the way they make decisions. They're changing the way that they see the world almost. The landscape of opportunities is shifting. And that is a bit mysterious how that happens. Like, I don't know if you could trace it like, oh, this minute in live session 3, that's when it happened. Maybe it's a collection of smaller mindset shifts. But then they finish it, and I could just tell that, they're logging off to their computer, turning to their team, and trying to explain what they just went through. And I can't even imagine how they could do that. It's like you're at a loss, My team, I had it easy because I could have them go through the program as well, and they have. And so we're all on the same page. But that kind of is going against the idea that you can have just an AI operator that has all the AI enablement and they go and do everything. Maybe not. Maybe what this is actually going to take is your entire organization going through some version of this training.
Yeah, and I do think you obviously get a lot more done with the same team. So I think outside of the paradigm shift that you want your team to take on, I think there's also a commitment shift. As you realize more and more what AI can do, how do you get, we mentioned this before, but how do you get them to then kind of commit to expanding their scope of their job description so much more? I think that's a challenge people will face. I'm facing that currently with some of my companies. Maybe when you introduce, so we do a lot of team-wide trainings, and when we introduce it, I make it optional. I'm not one of the guys who's like, use AI or you're fired and will never be able to be employed anywhere ever again. I make it optional, really, to identify who are the go-getters, right? And I run it myself, so it's like the CEO is running it, and then I see who actually uses it and adopts it, and we do little prizes and stuff for most usage and like best use cases. And you'll find like 20% of people will be power users, and those 20% will become your AI operators most likely. And those 20%, I've seen this already. Like one person who was our operations manager in one of our companies just took on so much more responsibility that I was like, I'm just gonna give him 10% of the company. Like at this point, you're doing like 5 people's jobs, and you're doing it really, really well. And another interesting thing that's going to happen is like key man risk is going to get so much worse. So the nice thing is that you do have everything documented if something happens to one person who's taking on 5 roles, but that's going to be an interesting challenge.
It's going to be like when that key person leaves, it'll be like losing 5 people. If they're doing 5 people's jobs, then
I mean, it's well documented, but you're still losing 5 people.
I hope you found our takeaways informative. If you want to know more about the invisible structure of business that we mentioned, more specifically what the customer lifecycle looks like, check out this video where we get into it in great depth.